Hey, I'm Daniel Berger, and this is Adventures of a Real Estate Broker. Welcome to the podcast where Metro New York real estate meets great stories and a douse of humor. Forget the dry sales talk. Here we dive into the fun and unexpected moments of real estate. Join me each week as we explore Westchester, Long Island, the Bronx, and more. You'll hear about the people, the places, and the crazy situations that make this industry so interesting. Thanks to our sponsor, Remax Prestige Properties, we're ready to share the lighter side of real estate. Whether you're a pro, a buyer, or just curious, we've got something for everyone. Ready for today's adventure? Let's get into it. Welcome, everyone, to another edition of the Adventures of a Real Estate Broker with Daniel Berger. I'm Daniel Berger. This week, we have the pleasure of speaking with Lisa Parenteau, who she has her own podcast, and I was able to be a guest on hers. And so I thought turnabout was fair play. And so thank you, Lisa, for coming on. But Lisa, she's with eXp Realty. She works mostly on Cape Cod, but I'm sure she'll sell you a place anywhere in the world. With 15 plus years of experience. And with that, thank you, Lisa, for coming on my podcast.
It's my great pleasure, Daniel. I love the connection that this allows us. The world kind of took a little bit of a more virtual turn in 2020, and I love to see as things have continued to evolve in our profession as well as just in life, being able to connect to people you would never have been able to have connected to before. It was a great pleasure to have you on my podcast, Lifting Others as We Rise, and I can't wait to continue our conversations.
My family was like, Dad, why are you doing a podcast? Who's going to pay attention to it? And so, I'm like, that's a good question. I don't really know, but again, talking to people and connecting, I think, that's a lot what, we do. We're like, what are we talking about today? Are we going to talk about real estate? Are we going to talk about sports? Are we going to talk about the world? But, there's so many things to talk about. But in the end of the day, I think, connecting people when there's a need, and then finding the professional to help them is really probably more of what we do than anything. Wouldn't you agree with that, Lisa?
Absolutely. And post middle of transaction, post close, having referrals and being able to connect people in that way is always been a huge piece, I think, of our work if we're good realtors. And that's what ends up 4 years later, 7 years later, those people calling out of nowhere. Hey, I had a change in life and we're looking to sell our home. And of course, we wanted to, connect with you and see if you'd be willing to list our home. That's what we're hoping for, right? And that happens because we continue to stay being connectors, and grounding them in our community. And same thing with agents across the country, for referrals. I'm in a resort and second home market. Primarily, we have people who live here year round, of course, myself included, but it is a resort and second home community. So a lot of my business has to do with referrals from other parts of the country. So continuing to connect to realtors all around the country is one of the byproducts of kind of the serial volunteering I do in our association that has continued to position me as Cape Cod Lisa.
That right. That's what I was gonna say, is that your Lisa sells Cape Cod, but really you're more than that. I don't put yourself on a tiny island, or
Pretty
because
big.
you know, you know, but ultimately people that you've helped buy and sell are gonna look to you to help them when other things in life come up that are real estate. That might be investment ideas. It might be like, oh, I'm looking in Colorado and Aspen. Do you know anyone? And obviously with your connections, you know, a lot of times people are probably calling you to say, you might not even know anyone in Colorado and Aspen, but can you help me find the person to help, and so then you're able to do your sleuthing in the internet, figure out who's actually doing business, and then even having conversations, right? To basically, before the client's even involved, you might have interviewed a couple of agents to say, I think this is a good fit for our client.
Absolutely. I would first look most likely between EXP, which is a huge network, but also CRS. I'm a certified residential specialist. I have been since really I've been back in the market since 2015, been in leadership with RRC nationally. So I certainly would look to a CRS, an agent that had a CRS designation, and an EXP agent with a CRS designation, and then maybe a luxury designation would be kind of my, an ideal partner, even if I didn't know them. I think there are certain things in our profession, that certain standards, certain designations, that I consider really the best of the best. And so that's kind of how, the direction I would go there.
So like today, I had one of my agents was like, "Oh, I need help finding something in Texas, in Eagle Pass, Texas, I believe." And so, I'm not going to be for me. I didn't just look at I did look at Remax because that's my brand, right? But I'm like, oh, okay. So, but then I kind of went out, right? And I looked on Google, I looked on Zillow. I was looking for people that were really like, doing some business. Um, and again, so ultimately it's while your EXP, I'm Remax, ultimately, yeah, those are our brands, but a brand doesn't sell anything, right? It's I always tell my clients, the sign on the lawn isn't what's selling the house, it's the communication. So a good realtor, whether it's the Lisa sign or the Danny sign or a brand, um, doesn't necessarily do it, but it is kind of helpful. And so I ended up referred to somebody, I think, in Keller Williams because when I looked at who potentially could help the client, that was a person that seemed to have made the most sense. Um, so you still have your name and it's your client, right? And if you're going to refer, you want to make sure that you're referring somebody that is going to get the job done.
Absolutely.
So, what are you seeing in the market, with being second homes or summer homes? Do you Was this year any different than the last couple of years? And what do you think might happen in the next year?
Oh, I mean, I mean, gosh, I don't think, well, so I don't think this market is anything like a market we've been in before, for a variety of reasons. I'm not sure that we reflected in the same way. I think there's probably comparisons to '06 to '08, right? So that's been kind of a comparison point that people always talked about in the market. But now we've been looking at, from 2020 until today, and there's never been the phenomenon that we've experienced, and certainly not in my market. The first couple of months, people were like, oh, they were ready to give us all a funeral, but people are never going to be able to, be buying a second home. And then within, 6 weeks, we realized they were coming out of the woodwork because they just wanted somewhere that was rare and beautiful. They could be with their families. And then as the years have gone on, work from home has shifted so much of people's um, search qualifications. And so that has had a tremendous impact, on the market here. I think, interest rates has had some impact, a variety, right? When it went up, everybody kind of pulled back. But I just saw the rates come down and it was a big ho-hum over here. I don't know if it was for your market, but it did not impact people's thought process, decisions, nothing. We have a lot of cash buyers. Anytime it's over 1 million, it's usually cash, believe it or not.
Um,
Under that is usually, under 750, it's financed probably, right? With someone that's holding on. But the other deals, and they may leverage it at some point and put a mortgage on it, but a lot of the transactions themselves are cash, and that's been the same. Um, what I find different is that the buyers are far more discriminating, which I think is a good thing. But you also have that element, I just had a transaction that went under agreement last week, and I had 5 offers, and the couple that purchased that are purchasing it, that won the offer, went so far over ask. No mortgage, a cash, of course, and no inspection contingency because they have lost so many homes. This
I,
one, this one was quite unique. It was on an acre and a half of land. It was 3,300 square feet. It was a luxury. It was on a pond. It had like very, specific, and they weren't going to lose it. So there's
So
also that, right? That phenomenon.
there is buyer fatigue. Well, there's seller fatigue and buyer fatigue, but buyer fatigue, sometimes so it's a hard thing when you're representing a buyer, right? To say, oh, waive the inspection because like I don't want to have it on my shoulders, nor do I even want it to even happen, whether on anyone's shoulders, but to buy a money pit, right? And not that inspections can necessarily do it, but there are some signs, right? Clearly of, foundational problems or other things that might have been shortcuts that maybe would be a clue, but it's not something that when I'm the buyer, I don't want to waive those things. When I'm the listing agent, of course, we represent the seller, and it's like, that it is what it is, but I don't mind sometimes losing deals with my clients because it's a process, right? And so, or clients that are constantly underbidding, and you're like, this is not the market. Like, I understand where you're at, and like my wife could never buy a house in today's market because my wife, it like when we, thankfully the house that we live in now, we bought in 1997. Like every house we went into, she's like 20% off. Like she thinks it's like a sale, It's like, oh, I'm gonna bid
Always
80%.
bargainizing. Yeah.
And I'm
It
like,
wouldn't be a
that
bad market.
would not work now, right? Well, maybe there are places where it's becoming more of a buyer's market, so maybe, but it's just good that I have my house right now. We have bought an investment property, but the numbers worked on that. But you do sometimes need to lose one, two, three, four to understand what the market is, right? Because it's not fair if Lisa or I are, "Oh, you need to be X amount over." I mean, it's their hard-earned money. It's really about, I always say that people should be bidding based off of their pain point, right? So like how high will you go that if someone bids a dollar more than that, you're going to be fine. You're like, I would never go that high, right? The worst is when people bid and they leave money on the table where they bid X and then the offer that's taken is a little bit more than that. They're like, we would have gone to that.
That's
We're
why I think
like,
an escalation clause is really key because then you can really honestly discuss, what is the drop dead. If they get that, if it's over that, we'll all say, God bless you, go in peace, right? Like that's
okay,
why I
so
love
I got to
escalation.
stop you now, Lisa, because you're talking too much common sense, right? Because correct. An escalation clause, especially if you're dealing with an agent that you feel to be like fair and then those are great. In our market, sometimes people are like, we're not doing an escalation clause. I'm like, you're not doing an escalation clause. I go, like, you know what? Sometimes there are agents that have been doing that. I've been doing this for about 8 or 9 years. So I still feel like I'm very fresh in it. And I try to come up with creative solutions to try to help, buyers and sellers. And what you just said of doing an escalation absolutely makes sense in my mind. I guess there are people that have been doing this for a long time. They don't want it. They think it's a pain. And I'm like, this isn't what the agent wants or not. It's what's best for the seller in this case, right? And I've had an example of a buyer that lowered their price $100,000 when they weren't allowed to do an escalation clause. And so they didn't get as much money as they could have. Not, but what's crazy is that the seller won't necessarily know that, right? Because not everyone shows the offers. I mean, so it's kind of crazy, but escalation clauses are a great tool, and not all listing agents allow that, or they don't communicate to their seller what that means, and thus it's not employed. Have you ever seen that up by you?
Yeah, I mean, I can remember a few times, where it will be written in agent remarks in MLS, seller will not entertain escalation clauses, and you think, good gravy. But I remember but maybe, I mean, I'm saying less than five, I can count them on one hand, maybe, and I've sold hundreds of homes, right? So I don't, and I will almost always recommend the idea of it. Now, not every buyer is comfortable. I explain it's kind of like eBay, where you get to put your highest number on, and you may not be going up to that highest number, but you need to say what's your highest number, and then a healthy increment that's going to move the needle, not $500, maybe 5,000, you know.
Right.
And
I agree.
they usually back down to 2,500, but there has to be enough of a incentive that if someone's looking at that, um, $2,500 if there's other contingencies may not be enough to push them over the edge, depending on the price range. If it's, $2 million, $2,500 is not going to be that's not going to be, it's not going to move the needle. So,
but that is, I love that tool and I use that tool where appropriate. But just as in eBay has like the high number, that's my whole point of the pain point. You bid up until your pain point, or you at least say, this is where I want to start my bidding. I will accelerate or escalate up till X amount, and then I'm done, right? Because that makes sense. And if you were in a real auction where we were all in a room and we all had paddles, right? Where you would be like, oh, I'm in, I'm in, I'm in. And so ultimately, agents who are representing sellers should do things like that. So another thing that I don't do is I'm not really a final and best person. What I generally would say is get me your best offer by whatever date, and then I'll generally go parse. I'll separate them all out, and then I'll generally try to work with the top three and say you're not number one, and then and to have the top three kind of work towards it, because ultimately I feel my job as a listing agent is to try to get the best number, but telling people final and best and that's a number, that's not always the best number, especially when you're starting to communicate saying, listen, you're close or whatever. I had an interesting one recently where um, they did an escalation clause and they said for like offers, which you and I know a like offer means do they have inspection, not have inspection, mortgage, no mortgage, all of those things. And so they escalated to over a certain point. And I basically came back. We selected them, but I didn't make them go. I actually said, you don't need to go that high because it's not a like offer, right? So your offer of waiving inspection really isn't, it's not fair to call that a like offer with someone that's not waiving inspection, as an example. So we were like, we weren't pushing them as high as what their piece of paper said. And so but that got like a lot of credibility for me and for my owner, that we didn't just, rake them over the coals, that we actually were fair about it. So that was very helpful in the whole process as well. So what are other strategies that you use to try to present, your buyers, to look, not always, winning, you don't always win with money. Sometimes you win with other aspects of the offer.
yeah. So, I mean, typically I will tell them, and I mean, I think we attract clients who will appreciate our style and our strategy. I would not be a great fit for someone who was super cautious, who wanted to take 5 years to, make their decision. And but so I typically tell them, hey, listen, I'm going to tell you what I think it's going to take. And you can tell me to pound sand. But I'm going to tell you,
Right.
I've been doing this for a long time. I'm an elder stateswoman, and so I have a gut, and so I'm going to tell you what I think it will take. And so then I talk about it's not just the number, it's also flexibility in dates, and then the contingencies. And I have not ever recommended waiving a home inspection if I haven't seen the home myself. So I don't always see them. Maybe they went to an open house without me. Maybe, like who knows what. That would be the only thing. Um, and as you had mentioned earlier, if there's a big crack in the foundation, if it's a home that is obviously been well maintained, there's a lot of owner, integrity in the fascia boards are rotting, there's little things that we know that we look for that will show the maintenance on the home, and things that will indicate deferred maintenance, and things that could indicate deferred maintenance, but nothing major. Everything can be fixed with money. Hopefully it will be
Yes.
theirs, not ours, right? So everything can be fixed with money, but hopefully
Money.
it's
That's
not ours, it's theirs. So if it's a home that I think, if it's going to be a competitive situation and we don't want to go way far over, and waiving the inspection might be an option, I certainly put it on the table. I tell them, as I tell everyone, of course, you're going to have an inspection because no one's going to go through every single outlet, open every single window, run everything, and teach you how to maintain this home in its highest form. That's what a good inspector will do. A good inspector is not going to go out there, cover as you know what, and give you all kinds of like horror stories. They're going to say, this should be done right away. This should be done within 12 months. They're going to put everything into context for you, not alarm you, but maybe you have that after purchase and sale,
Yeah.
right? And we'll request access, because that happened to me once during pandemic. They wouldn't let us in. We're going to request access for appraisal and inspection in our additional terms to make sure that they know we're coming back, even though we're saying we're waiving the mortgage contingency because we've already been in underwriting. We're not going to buy a car 2 weeks before the closing. We've already gotten it pre-approved in underwriting from our lender. They just did a refinance, let's say. I mean, there are times when you can actually do that as well. If you're risk averse, that would not be a good strategy. But we did that during the pandemic. We waived mortgage contingency with a mortgage. If
Yeah.
there were programs that did that. So conversations about these different contingencies is important, and of course, escalation clause, as we mentioned. And then, just really, if this is it, then we need to pull out all the stops. In my market, it's rarely this is it, because again, it's a second home. They have a primary somewhere else. They've already been renovating, put all their whatever into that. Usually this purchase isn't not that it doesn't have gravitas, but it's often not the same as a primary. I think when I see the people that are looking as a primary versus second home, it's a little bit different. They don't have to do everything right away. They can do a little bit over the next couple of years.
Uh, Another strategy I've sometimes done when I know it's going to be a competitive situation, some of my contractors, uh, sometimes it's better to have a contractor than a home inspector because that's their business. They know what things cost. But I've had contractors and home inspectors walk the house with me during either the open house or during a showing, so that we know that so it's kind of, we can waive the inspection knowing that I've already had the inspector in the house that is a little bit more trained than you. And I mean, you and I have been in hundreds of homes and sold hundreds. And so, we're probably able to see many things that potentially could be wrong from so many home inspections that we've done. And so I've been able to waive inspection by kind of having an inspection. And certainly, I sometimes even say that I brought in a I brought my contractor for an inspection, because they like that. Then you're done, right? Like, you're not really coming back. And the other option is doing six health and safety, but you do a health and safety, there's still a risk, at least in New York, because in Massachusetts, I think you go to contract right before your inspection.
No, well, we have two contracts in Massachusetts. So we have an offer to purchase, which is a contract that's written by realtors. And then we have the inspection. And for any reason, and you do not need to disclose the reason, for any reason, you are able to say, I'm not willing to move forward. I'm going to trigger my inspection contingency and get back your offer deposit. And then
Right.
if they don't, and we negotiate it out, or we say everything is hunky dory, and then we go to purchase and sale. That's written by attorneys. So we have two
Right.
contracts.
So in New York, we do have an offer to purchase, but it's not a contract. It's just really basically what the parameters are going to be. I kind of like it's more seller friendly in New York, because you you basically don't go to contract until after the inspection's done, if you're having one. Otherwise, it is really just an inspection to inspect, because you couldn't get out of it. Or if you did, you would actually, there would be, it depends on the terms, but generally you do the inspections before, so we know, are the people really in or are they not in? Because I know that in your state and other states that have that, Connecticut, you can do both ways in Connecticut, at least my part of Connecticut, because I'm licensed in New York and Connecticut. Um, but it holds like you transfer power of the sale from the owner to the buyer, because the buyer now has this, X amount of time that they're allowed to do inspections and can back out or adjust it. And in New York, you're able to keep having you can still keep showing the house because you're not in contract yet.
Well,
And other off,
you can here too. We
yeah,
have a status that's pending continue to show. So if you're contingent on a home inspection, you can certainly keep it. Now, do people really show? Sometimes, usually not, because it says,
right,
they'd have to really, really want to see it, check with you, but you wouldn't put the status pending, continue to show unless you were really wanted to encourage showings.
right. And so the people, in our market, people don't like, once you kind of are waiting for the contract. Generally, you don't do open houses. Generally, you could still have showings. My view is I still want to, until we're in contract, we're not in contract, because like you said, anyone could back out. But but again, those are just strategies just to try to, present your side as strong as possible. So here's a question. So Lisa, so the adventures of a real estate broker is really, uh, I thought of it from just some crazy stories that have happened to me along the way to the closing table. From bringing a shovel to a cemetery, looking for footstones of certain people's names, to cleaning out houses uh, um, that I have an example of an estate. The person didn't even know he had an uncle. He was selling his uncle's place, and we found, like, hoards. It was a bit of a hoarder, so we had ridiculous amount of stuff that included two skulls. And so we had to call the police and, make sure that there was, and he was a postal carrier. So that's a whole other going postal. But in the end of the day, actually, one of the skulls, they were both human skulls, but the police from forensics told us that the skull was removed from the head over 100 years ago. So that made it feel like they said that the owner was not involved in any crime, and that we didn't have to make the house a crime scene, and I was allowed to clean the house and then list the house and sell the house. So that's an example of a funny, of an adventure. So you've been doing this for a fair amount of years. What are some of your crazy adventure stories that you have, either on the buy side, showing a house, or listing a house?
Well, I can tell you that twice, not once, and they both had different outcomes. Twice, guns have been found in the home. One time, it was during a home inspection, and a firearm was found in the attic. And the inspector knew we're in a non-carry. We're not in a gun, like, not that it's unfriendly, but there's no concealed weapons kind of thing. So anyway, there's more gun controls, more strident here. So the home inspector knew that he had to call the local police, and that the local police came and removed the gun. But then more recently, I had a home, and for a variety of reasons, this was also the elder had died and it was a hoarding situation, and it would have been really beneficial to the seller, the daughter, if we could sell it off market, because to have that home photographed in any way, even emptied, would have not been a good situation for her. So I worked really hard to get that sold off market to one of my investors. And he called me, a couple weeks after the closing and said, so we found a gun in the house. And being a good doobie, he and his son put the gun in the car and drove it to the local police station. Well, the police flipped out because he didn't have a license to carry, and they were giving him all kinds of trouble, And I said, I wish you'd called me, because I knew that we're not supposed to touch the guns. We're supposed to call the police. So I mean, they didn't arrest him, but they certainly gave him a hard time. He had to show all kinds of ID, and he was like, I just brought it from this house. I obviously didn't have to turn it in.
I'm assuming it was a handgun, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, because the
Okay.
rules with handguns. So this house with the skull also had 8 guns that we saw, and the funny thing is the person that ended up selling, the nephew, that he didn't know he had an uncle. cleaned down. The guy actually had some things that were valuable that he went on eBay and other places he knew he could sell. He brought the guns with him. I'm like, so you're going from New York to Massachusetts, you're crossing state lines. You better, those guns should really be like in something that's locked, right? Where
Sure.
technically, and he had a trailer. So I'm like, you need to do that just to say, listen, I'm cleaning out my uncle's place. And I don't know what's in, I'm just cleaning it out and I'm just moving it, right? So he was like, oh, that's a good idea. So that house actually, I had to have pay someone like $8,000 to come and clean out the house. So, cleaned up the house. I mean, there were some dead animals in there. It was a pornography. It was like tons of stuff. And then they found five more guns. But our guns were all shotguns or rifles. So there is a different thing. So what's interesting is there was like five or six left. Um, I didn't I didn't live in the town that this was, and I didn't really just want to go to their police station. So I never touched them. I had them in a bag. I bring them, they're in my trunk. I drive them to my local police station. So it was funny when the police came for that house, we showed them the guns. They didn't care about the pornography. They only cared about the skulls. They're like, yeah, we don't care about the guns. But also, there were rifle and shotguns, so the rules are different.
Interesting.
So I bring these six or seven guns to my police station, where go inside and they're kind of like, whose guns are they? Because I was like, they're not mine. Like the whole point was they're not mine. I've never touched them. They're in my car, but I never, I didn't. There's no fingerprints. I don't know where those guns have been. Um, and so they're like, guess somebody must have been in my police station that day who was going to make a lot of paperwork for me bringing in the guns. And so they said, go outside. So a detective comes outside like 5 minutes later. He's like, where do you live? I give him my address. He's like, I'll be there in about 20 minutes. He comes over in his unmarked car. And while I thought I was donating my guns to the police station, I ended up donating my guns to a police officer who
Okay.
was in like the refurbishing business. And I was like, you know, go for it. I go, if they're worth anything, let's go out to dinner on you or something like that. But it you do have to use your head like on things like that, because you just can't like, oh, I was like, I left the guns in my trunk. I wasn't like walking them into the police station, where it's like you don't want to have anyone misinterpreting anything. I'm like, they're in my car and they're in a bag. They're like, okay. So the good news is if I get pulled over in my town, I could tell the story and I'm probably not getting a speeding ticket because I donated guns to one of the
Hopefully.
detectives
Yeah.
who who actually taught my children the DARE program years ago. So it was small town, but that's kind of funny. So yeah, so guns are certainly, were they loaded guns or not loaded?
I don't know. And I didn't
That
ask in either case. I did not ask.
yeah. So that's good.
Caution is
That's
in this state that if you do run into a gun, that you need to you need to call the local police station and have them come pick up the gun.
so from doing my podcast, one of the stories that someone said they had, or I mean, maybe it was I was telling them about my podcast, and I heard the story of they found a bomb, and it was like a World War II like legitimate bomb that was maybe like a torpedo and or a landmine or something, but it was like it turns out, they wouldn't even let the guy keep it. Like I don't know if it was active or anything like that, but it was like buried it was like whoever built the house like buried it in the house. It was like inside the house, like in the basement or something, and they put walls around it. Um and then it made them, and they said, we're trying to flip the house. That's the other thing, right? So they're trying to flip the house. So they really don't want any publicity, right? About that, oh, that's the bomb house or whatever. So they're like, no, 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 we'll take it. And then all of a sudden it was like news media and whatever. And they were like, I thought you said it wasn't gonna, but I think somebody must have called it in and it became this big thing and it was in the newspaper and maybe the local television station came. So you never know, right? When you open up some of these, it is like a Pandora's box.
Absolutely.
So, um, so you talk about being the second homes, and what percent of your business comes from referrals?
At this point in my career, 100%.
Wow.
Yeah. But now that being said, I did do a lot of Realtor.com when I first came back into the market in 2015, 16, 17. It was a very different program and platform back then. And I tried Zillow for 6 months once and didn't find that the quality of leads was anywhere near the same. But that was years ago. That was 10 years. It was a long time ago. Um, so yeah, and then over time, I mean, do I ever get reached out to by people that I really don't know? I suppose there's a little bit of that. We have a great CRM system in EXP called KV Core, and it has always had a layer of artificial intelligence. So when you have your contacts in there and your contacts are looking at certain properties over and over, it will on your dashboard every day, it'll say, Joe Smith looked at 123 Main Street 3 times, or Martin Sheen has just started looking at properties again after 3 weeks. It gives you an idea of the activity level of the people that are in your contact list. So could I be doing a lot more business if I was looking at that all day long and have business
Nah.
there? Yes, probably. But I am
Wow.
fortunate in that I have a lot of repeat client business. And maybe I sold the house next door. There's two happening right now that's the case. I happen to have sold the house next door, and so they contacted me to sell their house. Um, so that's that kind of referral. Many of the referrals come from agents across the country and EXP agents. That's been a huge, we have a couple of groups in workplace that are just referrals. And so if someone has, like you were saying, Eagle Creek, Texas, you would post that and you'd say, buyer or seller, what the deal was, what you were looking for. And you probably would then say, direct message me, because otherwise you're going to get like a million, responses back, because we have a huge group in Texas that will either be responding personally or they'll be recommending, Joe Smith. Um, so I have a lot of other realtor referrals, EXP referrals, and then, as I said, repeat clients. So yeah, I'm real lucky now in my career, really lucky.
Right. That's no, that's great. So what's interesting is, and a lot of that is, I've done stuff with Realtor in my market. I wasn't getting what I wanted. I've actually been doing Zillow since I started, and I still do Zillow. I'm the broker owner of my Remax, so we spend like $12,000 a month, and those leads get funneled to our agents. I don't really take those. I have some other sources. So I think you have to like experiment in our business. You have to experiment, and every zip code's different. And even though you do have to parse through them, right? So there are going to be like things that aren't going to work out, and it's the job to figure out, okay, these aren't viable because they can't get a mortgage or they're not really interested. But for the most part, I've actually built my business on the Zillow, where I figured that even if I was breaking even in years 1 and 2, I might get, I have people from Zillow that have done 7 to 8 transactions. And so if you do like 9 years, and you say that not everyone does that, but if enough people do it, it turns and then it's a lot of it is word of mouth, right? So if you do a really good job, then they're gonna, I actually my goal is that I try to work for the review, because figuring that if I get a good review, that I'll get paid if I have a good review, right? So don't work for the money, work for the review. The review is really just saying that you did your job appropriately, and that people will refer you to other people, whether it's, in our country, other countries, other cities. And so I felt that's really the backbone of trying to grow. But yeah, so everyone's different, and so you also have to be committed to those. If you're going to use one of those lead services, there are a lot of phone calls, and you have to pick up your phone, right? Even if someone's saying, oh, Lisa from Cape Cod, I have a referral from her. You just see a phone ring. You don't know who the person is. You got to pick up the phone, and that's going to help you get those referrals when people call in from around the country. We do get those bots that say, I want to buy a house, but I only talk on WhatsApp. Okay, so maybe those we delete right away because we get a lot of those, but you have to pick up your phone because that's how Lisa from Cape Cod's going to get leads.
Yep,
So,
absolutely.
but well, you anything else that you can impart for us on what you think? I know we have an election coming up, or by the time this airs, it's going to have already happened. Um, it seems as though our country, regardless of what's going to happen, we still, people are still living. They're spending their money. They want their second homes. Cape Cod's beautiful. Um, it seems like everything still, is going to be more similar than changing dramatically. But is that what you feel as well?
I think that real estate is the economic engine of the economy, and I think that it will continue no matter what. Our advocacy efforts are hugely important. I'm a Golden Hour President Circle investor in the Realtor Political Action Committee, RPAC, so I feel really strongly about supporting our advocacy at the state level and at the federal level, no matter where you are. And one of the things about supporting the Realtor Political Action Committee is that it's no D's or R's. It's just the realtor party. We need realtors on both sides of the aisle to support legislation that impacts personal property and homeowner rights. So it's a rallying cry, always has been, but even more important now for bipartisanship, and finding things that we have in common rather than things that divide us. So I like to think about that relative to the election, but politics in general and real estate in general, that our advocacy is hugely important for our clients and there's no personal property right association. There's no national homeowner association. There's just the realtor association. And there's a lot of, well, there's a lot of pending litigation. There are some huge rule changes. And Tony Robbins always says, everybody says they love change, but only when it's their idea. So, none of this was our idea. And so mostly everyone hates it. But we will continue to find ways to serve our clients. We'll continue to find ways to work with integrity and to support each other, because I think realtors supporting realtors is hugely important. And hopefully realtors will continue to support the National Association of Realtors, which has always been in their corner. Nothing is simple. There's a lot of gray area right now, but sticking close to your brokerage, because that's who's got your E&O insurance. Sticking close to your brokerage is very important, I think. And clients and potential clients, find a realtor who's connected, who you trust, and connect with them about, if you're about to go into a transaction, like what's really happening now with the proposed settlement. It should be not proposed, it should be the settlement at the end of November. We'll see if that in fact comes to light. We suspect it will. And then we're going to continue to make the very best of what we have for ourselves, for our clients, and for our profession.
Well, thank you. So you said the second thing of too much common sense, Lee said you're gonna get penalty points for being a common sense person. But talking about nonpartisanship, it's nonpartisanship is what it should be. It's a shame that our politicians, don't get in a room to try to help Americans, right? Because the right's not going to get what they want all the time. The left's not going to get what they want. But if you went in a room and actually said, "How do we help Americans?" then you would come up with things that would help all of us, and which is kind of what you're really saying. And so I agree 100%. It's not blue and red, or donkey and an elephant. It's really people that are trying to help people. So I do understand. I do agree with that. My view on the NARS, the National Association of Realtors, is that um so I my biggest view is that there was these lawsuits that happened in Kansas City, Missouri, I think is where they right where and bad lawyering and when you get in front of a jury, right? So you never know what can happen, but it's like Remax is I can't but like Remax has never told me ever what I should charge for my buyer services or my listing services. They get a piece of it, but they've never told me what it has to be. There's no rules behind it. NAR has never told me what I need to charge. It is always me sitting in a room with a, if I'm taking a listing, it's the free market works. Um, we determine what the price is, and a buyer's agent determines what the price is. So the idea that there's even collusion or any price fixing to me is like astounding. And I wish that my books were opened up and looked at by the Department of Justice, because they'd be like, wow, you're all over the place. I go, exactly. I'm all over the place because I make business decisions based off of, what's right for the business. And because it's all over, it's clear that there's no collusion, and it's a negotiation with a buyer or a seller. So it seems like we didn't do that, but a lot of money was paid because people were paying. Like Remax paid, I think, a $55 million fine or settlement, because not that they thought they did anything
As
wrong,
did
but
we. As did
because they felt that it was less expensive than the ongoing litigation. And so it's kind of sad, right? That it's not about right and wrong. It's about stopping the hemorrhaging of money. Um, you know, do I like the documents that we have now? I actually wrote my own buyer's agreement. My wife's an attorney, and we wrote one that follows the rules. So it's funny. A lot of people say it's the law. This is not a law. Laws are made by governments, right? State and local. This is more of our. If you want to be a realtor, right, then you're following these guidelines. These are guidelines that you must adhere to if you want to be an RMLS and be a National Association of Realtors. Um, and so, do I think it's perfect? No, but in so many things in life, nothing's perfect. And my view is, give me lemons and I have to make lemonade, right? And so we can sit back and we can whine and moan about what it is, or you can say, okay, tell me the game that we're playing, and I'm going to follow the rules, and we're gonna move forward based off of where we are today in a way, like you said, we have to help consumers, right? We're gonna have to help buyers and sellers. Our job is that people want to sell houses, people want to buy houses, and how do we do it with integrity and all those things that you said, following the rules that are outlined, not really whining, just going about following the rules and doing it. That's our job, right? We can only impact the things that we can do. I can't worry about other things necessarily, but I can make sure that I do it with honor and integrity and follow the rules. And so it seems like you're doing that. You're actually more involved in the association. So it's good that we had to talk, because you hear a little bit from me, but like ultimately it's just people who run the associations, and they're trying their best. And there's a lot of constituencies, there's a lot of states involved. It's, that's really where we're at. I know that people are trying to make it better, and I do like more transparency. That's one of the things that I don't really like, that it seems like it's less transparent now. But you know what? You said, we're hopeful that there's going to be a settlement or an approved settlement. And I would hope that people can make tweaks. You can't tweak something until it's settled. So get the settlement. And then, like you said, then you can kind of lobby a little bit to try to make things better, right? And so nothing's ever going to be perfect. So we're here now. Great. Let's see where we're at. And then let's all things, you tweak things and try to make things better going forward. Um, that's all we can do, right?
correct.
So, but so that was, I don't even like, Lisa's like, where are we going now? No idea. So that's part of the adventures of real estate brokers. I don't know what's coming out of my mouth. No one does. Um, but I want to, this is another edition of the Adventures of Real Estate Broker with Daniel Berger. I do want to thank Lisa so much. Uh, Lisa sells Cape Cod, but she does a lot more. So obviously, if you have leads, I know that when I have people looking to buy and sell in Cape Cod, I know who to call, because she'll get it done. She'll get it done honorably, ethically, and for good prices. And so I appreciate you coming on the podcast. It's great talking to you for a second time. And hopefully we'll see each other out there and we'll be able to help send each other's business. So thank you very much, Lisa.
Thank you, Daniel. It's been really a pleasure.
Thanks for joining me on the adventures of a real estate broker. I hope you enjoyed our time together as much as I did. If you laughed, learned something, or just had a good time, do yourself a favor and subscribe to the podcast. A big shout out to our sponsor, RE/MAX Prestige Properties, for making this all possible. Remember to leave a review if you enjoyed the show. It helps more people find us. Until next time, keep it real, keep it fun, and keep exploring the adventures in your neighborhood. I'm Daniel Berger, your New York Realtor, and I'll see you in the next episode.